Habari everybody, welcome to another exciting video. Now, in this video, I want us to talk about the top 20 must-know protocols and the port numbers if you are taking exams such as the Security Plus specifically, or the Network Plus, or maybe the CISSP. These are the must-know protocols and the port numbers that you need to memorize for that exam. Now, we put together a really good PDF with the top 20 protocols that you must know. And if you stick around until the end, I will show you where you need to go to download this so that you can memorize this before you walk into that exam. Let's get to it. Okay, so your question might be, okay, Francois, what are protocols anyway? Well, protocols are like language. When two things are communicating, they must use the language that they both understand. So in the computer world, we have what we normally call servers, and then we have what we normally call clients. So when these two things are communicating with each other, they need to speak the same language. So we have different languages, if you will, or different protocols, if you will, that we use for all sort of reasons. For example, if you are accessing a website, well, you need to speak a language that a web server will understand. Well, if you're sending an email, well, you need to speak a language that the email server will understand, and on and on. So in this video, I want us to talk about 20 different languages, if you will, that a computer use when they are interacting with each other. The first one is the HTTP protocol. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It happens to be on port 80, okay, and it's not secure. So HTTP is used when you're accessing websites. So if you go to, you open your browser and then you go to google.com, you are using the HTTP protocol, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And then you go in, you're basically accessing the Google servers to send you the web page. You're like, hey, Google, I want this. Actually, you're using a get command. You're basically get me this web page. That's exactly what you're doing with HTTP. The problem with HTTP is not secure. What is the secure version of HTTP? Well, it's the HTTP with the S at the end, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. Now, here's the thing about TLS. Every time you secure something with a TLS, well, it's going to change the port number. So instead of using port 80 as we use with HTTP, well, that's going to change to port 443. So HTTPS operates on port 443. You need to remember that for your exam. And HTTPS, it's super secure, very secure. All the data that you share as you're communicating using HTTPS, it's super secure. So when you take a look at the websites, all of them pretty much are using HTTPS. That's because we do a lot of things online now that requires us to have that security. And the other thing, in 2018, they released TLS version 1.3, right? TLS version 1.3. When they released this, it had a feature that's known as a DOH, right? DNS over HTTPS. And this was a little bit revolutionary because the thing is, it required every website to be secure. Right, the browsers like Google Chrome and Firefox, they could easily go in and say that, hey, unless your browser is using HTTPS, we are not going to load up the browser in the browser. I mean, that website in the browser. So a lot of websites are now using HTTPS. So what you need to remember for this exam, HTTPS is port 443 and is used for secure websites. The next one we have is FTP. FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. You got to remember this one for your exam. And this is like that digital cargo track. Why? Because it transfers bigger files. File transfer, it's literally in the name. It's used to transfer files, but these are going to be bigger files. So if you're sending a movie using the internet online, you are probably using FTP. FTP operates on port 21, right? It can also operate on port 20. So if you see 20 or 21 on that exam, they're literally just talking about FTP. But FTP is not secure, right? So we can secure FTP. And FTP is one of those protocols that can be secured using two different protocols, right? Like we can literally secure FTP using two other secure different protocols. The first one, I've already talked about it. We can secure FTP using TLS, the transport layer security, which will change the port number from 21 to 990, right? So the name is going to be FTP secure, right? It's going to be File Transfer Protocol secure, right? That's the version number 1 of securing the File Transfer Protocol. We can also secure FTP using what we normally call a secure shell, or SSH, which we'll talk about that next. But when we secure FTP using a secure shell, it's going to turn it into secure FTP. So and the port number is going to change from 21 to port 22. Now, here is something that you need to remember. Whenever you secure something using secure shell, it doesn't change the port number. Unlike TLS that goes in and just kind of change the port number. When you secure anything using SSH, it's not going to change the port number. So SSH usually uses a port 22. Super secure. Is used when you're doing things like a remote connection into Linux, pretty much like Linux machines. But we can use a secure shell or SSH to secure other protocol. In this case with FTP, we can secure FTP using SSH, which is going to turn it into secure FTP. Remember, the secure is at the beginning, right? When you secure FTP using SSH, the secure is at the beginning. So this turns into the SFTP, which will be port 22. Okay, port 22. And when you are securing FTP using TLS, it's going to be FTPS. The S is at the end, and that will be port 990. Okay. Another one we have here, it's Telnet. You gotta remember Telnet. Telnet, it's like an outdated version of SSH, right? Telnet used to be really good on kind of a remoting into routers and switches for the purpose of like administrating them, right? Configuring them and that kind of stuff. But Telnet is not secure, right? Telnet, by the way, stands for Telecommunication Network, which kind of, it's obvious. And it operates on port 23. Remember that. It's just like another version of, so on that exam, if they ask you things like, oh, which one is a lesser version of SSH? Well, it's going to be Telnet. Because Telnet allows you to remote into devices, things like routers, firewalls, Linux computers, but it's not secure. So we don't use Telnet anymore. Nowadays, we use SSH, port 22 for remoting into computers as well. Another one we have, it's SMTP. This is the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. This is port 25. And it is in a name. It's used to send emails. Right? Think about this as like a mail carrier, right? Something that carries your email. Well, SMTP is used to send emails between mail servers. So if I have like a server, like a mail server here, let me not use mine. Let's think about Google and Microsoft. So Google have their own Gmail. So they have a mail server, it's known as a Gmail, and Microsoft also have the Outlook. So the email that goes from Google servers, let's say I have a Gmail account and I'm sending you an email, and then you have a Microsoft account. Well, if I send you that email, SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, is the protocol that's going to be used to send that email from Google Gmail servers to Microsoft servers. Okay. Now, once the email gets into those servers, there is another protocol that is used to be able to grab that email from the server into the client. I'm talking about the email server now. Okay. So SMTP port 25, it's used to send emails between servers. Remember that for your exam. And then you have your POP. POP stands for Post Office Protocol, specifically version 3. So POP 3 happens to be on port 110, right? And this one is used to download emails from the email server to the email client. So for the example that I was giving you a minute ago, where SMTP is used to send emails between servers, well, once it gets to that server, POP 3 might be one of those protocols that we're using to be able to grab that email from the Gmail servers into the Gmail client machine as well. Then you have your IMAP. Well, the problem with the POP 3, it's going to download the email, which means it's going to remove the email from the servers, the Gmail servers. Well, IMAP, which happens to be on port 143, and IMAP stands for the Internet Message Access Protocol, happens to be on port 143. This one, it's beta than POP because it doesn't remove the email from the servers. So it's going to be, it's going to allow you to access the emails, but also leave that email in the server. In another word, you can be able to pull the same email. You can pull up the same email from your computer, and then if you want to access the same email from your phone, you can do the same thing, which is what most of us do these days anyway. So IMAP is the one that's constantly used these days when we're accessing the email from the email server. Another protocol we have is DNS. DNS is the Domain Name System. This one happens to be on port 53, and this is the translator. Think about this as the phone book of the internet, right? Without DNS, we will all be forced to memorize numbers because computers don't speak words. Every time you say www.google.com, the computer have no idea what you're talking about. It doesn't know what google.com is. But guess what? The computer knows the IP address that is associated with google.com. So DNS is the system, in this case a protocol, the protocol that allows us to translate from IP addresses, meaning numbers, into names and vice versa. So it makes the internet more usable because it's a lot easier for us as humans to remember the name instead of the IP address. So DNS is definitely one of those things you have to remember for that exam, and it operates on port 53. Another one we have is DHCP. This is the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Happens to be on port 69. Well, what is DHCP used for? Well, this one is used to assign IP addresses, right? Those numbers that computers remembers. Well, what if you have like 1,000 computers that you want to assign those numbers to? Well, that's where the DHCP comes in. The DHCP, the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, is used to assign these numbers to computers automatically, without the human going in and manually saying, this is going to be 10.10.10.5, 10.10.10.6, 10.10, right? You got the idea. So DHCP port 69 used to assign IP addresses to computers. Another one we have that's going to be on that exam, it's a Trivial File Transfer Protocol, or TFTP. You're like, we're going back to FTP again? A little bit. Well, FTP is used to transfer bigger files. Well, TFTP is for smaller files. So if you want to transfer like small files, you will use TFTP. Well, TFTP is not secure, and I probably should keep saying that. All the protocols that we just talked about, from SMTP to POP and IMAP and DNS and DHCP, none of them are secure. So they are all unsecure, but we can secure them using TLS. But I want to keep this to what's going to be on that exam. Okay. Another one we have here is SMTP or SNMP. Excuse me. SNMP, which stands for Simple Network Management Protocol. Well, this one happens to be on port 161, and this one is used to monitor networks. right? It's a simple network management protocol. It's literally in the name. So if you want to know how your routers are doing, your switches are doing, this is one of those protocols that you can install in. We call this traps. So you can install this into the you can install the agent, the SNMP agent, into the switch, into the router, and these things are going to be reporting back to you. They'll send you what we normally call these traps, notifications that tells you, hey, here's how I am doing as a switch, here's how I'm doing as a router. Well, SMTP 161, it's not secure, but they have like a different versions of this. So version 3 of SMTP, that's the secure version of SMTP. They have version 1, they have version 2, and they have version 3. Version 3 is the most secure one. Another one we have here, it's LDAP. LDAP stands for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. This one happens to be on port 389. And then what is used for? Well, it's used when you're accessing users' information. Now, when somebody's trying to log in, for example, and then you want to access their information from, let's say, the Active Directory server, well, then you will use LDAP. Okay, LDAP will be the protocol that you will use for that reason as well. So it's a directory access. It's literally in the name. Directory access. It's used to query directory databases such as Active Directory. For example, just to grab, for example, login information and all the other things. Then you have your secure LDAP. So this is the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol Secure, or what is known as LDAP-S. Now this is the secure version of a LDAP, and it happens to be on port 636. Okay, so if you want to query the database securely, you can use the secure version of LDAP. Another one we have here, it's RDP. RDP, it's the Remote Desktop Protocol. Happens to be on port 3389. Remember that, port 3389. And this is an equivalent to the SSH, the secure shell that I was telling you earlier, that happens to be on port 22. It's an equivalent to that, but RDP is on Windows, right? Remember, SSH is more on Linux. They do have tools that makes SSH to work on Windows, like Putty, one of my favorite tool. But RDP happens to be on Windows. It's a Microsoft technology. It was developed by Microsoft, but it's used for remote desktop. If you want to remote into another Windows computer, RDP is the one that you will use. Another one we have, it's NetBIOS. NetBIOS stands for Network Basic Input and Output System. Happens to be on port 137. This one is used for network communication, and it's old. It's not secure. It should be turned off. But when the devices are communicating on the network, like the same network, we're talking about like a LAN, a local area network, there could be using a NetBIOS. It's old, but Microsoft usually leave that turned on for backward compatibility reasons. Right? That's one of the problems we have with Microsoft. They turned a lot of the things on, so the basic security most of the time is to go back in there, turn it off, and then decide what you want to turn on. But NetBIOS, it's one of those things that is turned on by default, and it happens to be on port 137, and you want to go there and turn it off if you don't need it. Another one we have here, it's SMB. SMB, it's the server message block. This one happens to be on port 445. Just like NetBIOS, this one is also used when devices are communicating on the network. Not just communicating, but also like sharing files and the printers. For example, when you want to print at the company network, well, it could be using SMB, the server message block, right? To be able to send that paper to the printer so that the printer can do what the printer does. Now, what's the problem with SMB? It's not secure. Just like NetBIOS, it's not secure. Well, that's a big problem, because in 2017 there was some attacks. There were some attacks that took place, and these have been the most expensive attacks in history of cyber. Okay, one of them is known as NotPetya. And another one is known as WannaCry. And these attacks, they utilized that bad boy. They utilized SMB. So the attackers were getting in using SMB, not secure. Then once they're in, they were doing all kind of things, right? All kind of things. These two attacks that I just mentioned, which they both use the same vulnerabilities that was in SNMP, SMB, the server message block, it cost organizations over $10 billion to recover from those attacks. So the most expensive attack as of right now, right? We don't know what's going to happen in the future. Anyway, so number 19, it's NTP. NTP is the Network Time Protocol, which happens to be on port 123. This one, it's really simple, straightforward. It's used to synchronizing time or clock. Now, why is this important? Very important, especially when you want to be able to identify when an event took place. For the people who work in the SOC, the Security Operations Center, the first line of defense, we call them. Well, these people, whenever something bad happens, they want to know when did it happen, what device that reported it, and what time was it. That's very important. The reason is, if Mr. Router is reporting this, and the firewall is reporting this, and then a computer is reporting this, and something's, the CIEM is reporting this, well, you want to kind of aggregate all of that data and to be able to correlate it so that you have an idea of that attack. NTP help us with that. Right? Making sure that time is synchronized through all the devices is very important. So NTP is the Network Time Protocol, happens to be on port 123. Last but not least, number 20, we have the ICMP, the Internet Control Message Protocol. Now, this one doesn't have a port number, I have to admit. It doesn't have a port number, but it's really, really important. And part of the reason why it doesn't have a port number is because it's used to troubleshoot IP, the Internet Protocol. Now, the Internet Protocol, which when we say the IP address, that number, well, this one, it's all of the protocols from 0 all the way to 65,535. When you take a look at the conversation, it's usually the IP, colons, and the protocol number, right? And the IP is used to troubleshoot. ICMP is used to troubleshoot IP. Quickly, story about this. When they developed the IP protocol worked really, really well, that they didn't want to mess with it. And that was the problem they had, in those days. It's that they were just developing these things. Really, security was not in the room. I have a mentor who told me he had a friend, and his friend was one of the people that developed a lot of these underlying technologies like IP, ICMP, and the TCP, like all these core protocols that we use for the internet. And his friend told him that, hey, look, when we were developing those things, IP was not in the. Security was not in the room. Right? Basically, there was nobody in charge of making sure that these things are secure. Which is one of the reasons why we have a lot of problems now. Anyway, so ICMP is used to troubleshoot IP because when they developed IP, it worked really well, that they really didn't want to go back and kind of mess with it. And they said, you know what, we will develop another protocol that can troubleshoot IP. And that's why they developed ICMP, and with tools such as a ping or traceroute and these other tools, they all uses ICMP behind the scene. Now look, these are the top 20 must-know protocols for your exams. You got to memorize these. You got to kind of create flashcards, write what the protocol is, the port number, and what it does. Now, as a way of me saying thank you to you for watching the video until the end, I want to give you the PDF. So please check the description of this video. There will be a link. Click on that link and then go grab a copy of this PDF. These are must-know protocols and port numbers for that exam. And it doesn't matter if you're taking the Security Plus, the CISSP, the Network Plus. These are a must-know. Grab a copy.